This video is sponsored by Atlas VPN. Ensure your online safety by clicking the link in the description and grab the huge limited Black Friday offer of just $1.70 plus 6 months extra with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Stay tuned to learn more about their services throughout the video. Also, if you want to help this channel to continue, head on over to the Patreon page. The link is in the description. Hey you, yes, you. Have you ever wondered why does Greece even exist? Well, I bet that if you're a Turkish nationalist or the German government, you do think about that a lot. However, this wasn't always the case. Since the fall of Constantinople in 1453, for a rather long period, a proper Greek nation did not exist. Well, there were attempts of creating one. Actually, they had a total of 123 revolts against the Ottoman Empire, but none of them succeeded. The truth of the matter is, Greece wanted to be independent, and they had a word for it. Romeiko, which conveyed the idea of the liberation of Constantinople and the resurrection of the old Byzantine Empire through the blessing of Christ and the help of a Christian monarch. Hard stuff. The Greeks under the Ottomans actually felt more related to the orthodox traditions of Byzantium than with the filthy pagans of ancient Greece, even to the point of calling themselves Romioi, which literally means Romans. Today we'll be exploring how the Greeks achieved their independence from the Turks. This video will probably be full of those exacerbated nationalistic comments. Just make sure that no one finds out that while you're making such patriotic remarks in spite of other nations, you're actually living at a flat in Frankfurt. Well, if that's the case, why don't you try using Atlas VPN? With Atlas VPN, you'll be able to hide your location whenever you're online. All you need to do is to connect to the Atlas VPN servers from any device and bam, you'll be able to safely surface the web. No need to worry with people trying to steal your data. It's just simple as that. Also, is your favorite show not available in your country anymore? Don't worry. Atlas VPN allows you to change your location so you can enjoy any content from around the world. I know that you secretly love Turkish dramas, and since you're already here, why don't you take a vacation to Turkey and experience this wonderful country? Don't worry, Atlas VPN will also help you save your money with airlines when booking your hotel and many more services while shopping online. The results are amazing. And you know what's better? Atlas VPN is giving a huge limited Black Friday offer of only $1.70 per month. Plus 6 months extra, and with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So what are you waiting for? Go grab the Black Friday price cut that Atlas VPN is offering. The link is in the description or via this QR code. Thanks to Atlas VPN for sponsoring this video. It's the 19th century, and the Greeks decided to try once again to free themselves from the Ottomans. You never know, maybe the 124th revolt is the lucky one. However, in 1814, the fate of the Hellenic nation was not being decided in Greece, but in Odessa, a city which during that time was part of the Russian Empire. There was a large Greek community in Odessa, and it was in this context that Emanuel Xanthos, Athanasios Tsakalev, and Nikolaos Koufas created the Philiki Eteria, a secret society for the liberation of Greece. However, there was a problem. The three men were from the lower classes and didn't have enough influence to make the revolution happen. So the Philiki Eteria started to search for real leadership. They even tried to hand this position to the influential Ioannis Kapodistrias. Kapodistrias was a Greek working under Tsar Alexander I of the Russian Empire. However, he did not want to take part in any revolutionary organization, so they were left with the other option, Prince Alexander Ypsilantis, an aristocrat from a Phanariote family. The Phanariotes were super wealthy Greek Orthodox families that played a rather significant role in the administration of the Ottoman Empire. The Phanariotes were appointed by the Sultan to rule over the Danubian principalities. Apart from his noble origins, Alexander also had worked as an aide-de-camp for the Tsar during the Napoleonic Wars. And by the way, he lost an arm because of it. So when he was offered the leadership of the Philiki Eteria, he accepted. The Russians, after winning the Russo-Turkish War of 1768 and signing the 1774 Treaty of Küçükçekmece, got the role of protector of the Orthodox communities inside the Ottoman Empire. The Greeks were Orthodox, and Ypsilantis had connections to Russia because of his previous military services. So he started using this to convince people to join the society, stating that he had the Russians backing them. He did not have the Russians backing them. Why? Well, it's because all of this was happening after the turmoil of the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars. So the European powers gathered at the Congress of Vienna and decided that revolutions were not cool. So even though it was in the interest of Russia to support the Greek rebellion and weaken the Ottoman Empire, the Russians were avoiding screwing with the new European order. But Ypsilantis was determined to make it happen anyway, and he knew that he needed to move fast. The year is 1820, and Sultan Mahmud II of the Ottoman Empire had a falling out with the rather autonomous Albanian governor of a region known as Ioannina. To deal with this, the Sultan ordered the governor of the Peloponnese, Khurshid Pasha, to move his troops and recover Ioannina. The Peloponnese was thus left virtually unprotected, but it wasn't the Peloponnese the main target of Ypsilantis' plans. Rather, it was Moldavia and Wallachia, because of their proximity to Russia, their large Christian population, and also their Christian governors, the Fanarioti families aforementioned. Then, on the 22nd of February 1821, Ypsilantis crossed the Pruth River, leaving Russia into Ottoman territory, with his army ready to start the revolution to free the Greeks, and he was quickly crushed. Ypsilantis then fled to Habsburg territory and got imprisoned, ending his part of the story. Okay, but what about the Peloponnese? Well, they were told to wait for Ypsilantis to arrive. So they waited, and waited, and waited, until fight broke out at the end of March. Today, Greece's Independence Day is commemorated on March 25, the same day as the Annunciation of the Virgin Mary. Some sources speculate that this date was Ypsilantis' initial plan of when should the uprising start in the Peloponnese, obviously making a connection to the holy date. However, fighting had already broken out in the region before that. On the 17th of March, Petros Mavromichalis, the leader of the Maniots, was already taking the city of Kalamata, liberating it on the 23rd. On the 22nd, fighting also broke out in Patras. And then Kalavrita was laid siege on the 25th, under the leadership of Theodoros Kolokotronis. Okay, these are a bunch of names. Who were the Maniots? The Maniots were the people often described as the descendants of the Spartans, sort of, that lived in the Mani Peninsula, in the southern tip of the Peloponnese. This region was virtually self-governed from the rest of the island. Petros Mavromichalis was its governor, or as it was called back then, he was its bey. Petrobey, as he was also called, was one of the key figures of Greece's War of Independence. But he wasn't alone. Another prominent figure, and many can say the most important figure of the war, was Theodoros Kolokotronis. Kolokotronis was the leader of the Klefts. What is a Kleft? Come on, do you even know something? Klefts were irregular armies that fought on the mountains against the Ottomans. They were a solid force behind the Orlov Revolt of 1770. What were the Orlov Revolts? That would be the 122nd Greek revolt that ended in failure. Kolokotronis' father was a hero of that revolt, and because of that, his family was exiled to the island of Zakynthos, that was under British control. But now Kolokotronis was back on the mainland and ready to fight. In response to the Greeks' insurgents, the Sultan executed the Patriarch of the Orthodox Church. I bet that now the Greeks will learn their lesson and forget about this independence thing. Oh, looks like they swiftly conquered virtually the entirety of the Peloponnese in little more than a week instead, with the main exception being the region's capital, Tripolitsa. Even though the war was going pretty well for the Greek side, the revolution still lacked a real leadership. So even before the siege of Tripolitsa started, the notables of the region created the Peloponnesian Senate to establish the directions of the war, and named Petrobey as commander-in-chief of the land forces. This would not last long, since the brother of Alexander Ypsilantis, Demetrius Ypsilantis, had just arrived in the Peloponnese. And because he was loved by the members of the Philiketeria, he felt confident to say that that the Peloponnese Senate sucked and that he should be dictator. The landowners of the region called Kotzabashis thought that the Philiketaria and Ypsilantis were a bit too radicals and feared that they would lose their own influence on the peninsula if they let them have so much power. So a compromise had to be settled. For Demetrios Ypsilantis to share power with the Peloponnesian Senate and to be named as commander-in-chief instead of Petrobe. So now the Greek revolt had a solid leadership, right? Well, by the middle of August, news of Alexander Ypsilantis' terrible campaign in the Danubian principalities finally came to the Peloponnese. So the reputation of the Ypsilantis family, including that of Demetrios, shrank. So once again the question of a central leadership to the Peloponnesian campaign arose. Well, at least on the 23rd of September, the Greeks took Tripolitsa, the administrative capital of the region. They had committed some atrocities there. The Sultan would not forget that. But revolution wasn't exclusive to the Peloponnese. There were also uprisings in continental Greece, more specifically this region called Roumeli. In the eastern continental Greece, the revolution was being carried out by a chieftain called Odysseus Ondroutsos. In the west, the revolution was slower, but slow progress was being made by another chieftain called Varnakiotis. Hey, what if we had a more centralized administration to the western continental region? Said a guy named Alexandros Mavrokordatos, who just came to western Greece after years of studying in Pisa. A product of the Enlightenment, he spoke 10 languages, was an avid reader, and wore western clothing. The Greek chieftains, in contrast, hated him, calling him outsider, pen pusher, and four eyes. Mavrokordatos founded the Assembly of Western Continental Greece in the town of Messalongi on the 9th of November 1821, creating a senate of 10 men to govern the region, with himself as president. Look, the Eastern Greeks created a similar assembly, with a guy named Theodoros Negris as president. Along with the aforementioned Peloponnese Senate, Greece was technically with 3 governments, a total mess in terms of organizing the revolution. What if we had a national assembly to rule alongside those 3 regional assemblies? Said Mavrokordatos, apparently being the only one with new ideas. And the Greeks agreed, so a national assembly was established at Epidavros, with representatives from all over the Greek regions. Whoa, the National Assembly quickly turned into Greece's first provisional government, with Mavrokordatos as president, of course. At the beginning of 1822, the first Greek constitution was also adopted, and the Declaration of Independence was signed. Quickly, the revolution was taking its first political steps. Okay, but what about the islands? The Greek islands were responsible for the majority of the Greek ships, and were mostly comprised of merchant vessels coming from the islands of Spetses, Psara, and Hydra. But of course, these small merchant vessels could not compare to the large Ottoman navy. So what could the Greeks do? Well, of course they would set their vessels ablaze and crush them against the enemy lines. What a great idea! Look, it's the 30th of March 1822 and the Ottomans just committed some tremendous atrocities against the inhabitants of the island of Chios. It was so bad that the island still to this day did not recover its former demographics. The French painter Eugène Delacroix would later dedicate a painting portraying the event. Speaking of the Europeans, does anybody want to fight alongside Greece? No, said the European great powers. Yes, said the Greekabus, or the Philhellenes, as they were also known. They volunteered to fight for the Greek cause, many of them dreaming about liberating the land of Homer and Socrates from the Ottoman tyranny, even though the average Greek at the time probably didn't know who those were. But while the Greeks were playing politics, Khurshid Pasha had already finished Ali Pasha and was ready to go against the Greeks. He sent Omer Vrioni to conquer western continental Greece, and after encountering an army of Philhellenes led by Mavrokordatos, he defeated them at the Battle of Petta. He then attempted to take the capital of the western continental Greece's government, Messalongi, but he was unsuccessful. Before that, Khurshid Pasha himself was getting ready to go on the Peloponnese. Not so fast. The Sultan appointed Dramali Pasha to invade the Peloponnese on his place, but as it turned out, Dramali Pasha was an incompetent and lost to a much smaller Greek force. He died shortly after that. Khurshid was really disappointed on being replaced by Dramali. Hey look, a letter from the Sultan. Maybe he decided to hand the position of leader of the Peloponnesian campaign to him. Let's see. Oh, this is probably because the authorities in Constantinople suspected that Khurshid Pasha took secretly some money from Ali Pasha for himself instead of sending it all to the Sultan. And so, in a matter of few days, the Ottomans lost their best commander and their last chance of a possible early end to the Greek revolt. It's time for politics. The Greeks decided to revise and make some important reforms to the first constitution during a second National Assembly, held between the 23rd of March and 30th of April 1823. What is this sound? Oh, it's just the Ottomans. They are trying to take Missolonghi again. Yes, it's the second time. Here, look. They've lost again. So let's get back to the reforms. The new government was headed by Petrobey. Kolokotronis was the vice president. Mavrokordatov became Minister of Foreign Affairs and secretary to the executive. The executive had its powers reduced and the legislative chamber had its powers increased. Hey look, Mavrokordatov was elected president of the legislative chamber alongside his other positions. This enraged the Peloponnesians, who didn't like the idea of a non-Peloponnesian having so much power in his hand. However, the most impactful reform would be the abolishment of the regional assemblies. And now the governors of those regions would be appointed by the central government at Nafplion, a more centralist approach to the revolution. This annoyed even more the Peloponnesians, who felt that their powers were being deprived with the fall of the Peloponnesian Senate. Kolokotronis took the side of the Peloponnesians, and he started to threaten the legislative chamber. The legislative chamber, in protest, moved to the island of Salamis. So Greece now had virtually two governments. The one led by Petrobey, and the other linked by the legislative chamber, was headed not by Mavrokordatos, but by Georgios Koudouriotis, an influential ship owner and leader of the revolution on the island of Hydra. So in true Balkan fashion, in 1823, just 2 years after the revolution started, Greece began its first civil war. And in 1825, with the help of massive loans from the London Philhellenic Committee, a non-governmental society, the Koudouriotis government won and Kolokotronis was imprisoned. But what about the Ottomans? They've been really quiet lately. Hey Egypt, you're my vassal. Why don't you help me fight the Greeks on the Peloponnese? Sure, said Egypt. The Egyptians had already contained successfully the Greek revolt on the island of Crete. The Ottoman army was obsolete. Egypt, on the other hand, was rapidly modernizing under the leadership of Muhammad Ali, an Albanian that just happened to be governor of Egypt. And through the guidance of Soliman Pasha, a Frenchman naturalized in Egypt, the Egyptian army was updated on the European model. The army was put under the orders of Muhammad Ali's son, Ibrahim Pasha, and on the 11th of February 1825, during the winter, he landed 20,000 men unopposed, thus starting the Egyptian campaign on the Peloponnese. Koudouriotis was worried with the Egyptian advance, while their best general was imprisoned, so Kolokotronis was set free, like nothing had happened during the last 2 years. In just 1 year, Ibrahim had already conquered almost the entirety of the Peloponnesian Peninsula. Look, it's time for another siege on Missolonghi. This time, the joint forces of Ibrahim Pasha and Reşid Mehmet Pasha, aka the Ottoman commander-in-chief of the continental Greece campaign, together they had managed to take the city. Missolonghi became famous throughout Europe, not only because it took 3 sieges to take it, but also because of Lord Byron, one of the most important poets of the English Romantic movement, and probably the most notorious of the Philhellenes, who had spent large sums of money for the Greek cause, and even volunteered himself to the fray. He died during the second siege of Missolonghi on the 19th of April 1824, making this city famous throughout Europe. And when news started to spread that Missolonghi had fallen, it shocked the European population, which considered the city as a symbol of Greek resistance. In France, in 1825, a philanthropic union of Philhellenes under the patronage of the Duke of Orleans, aka the future King of France, was founded. Rossini wrote an opera mirroring the events of Missolonghi. Another painting from Eugène Delacroix was produced, romanticizing the siege. The former Minister of Foreign Affairs of France, François-René de Chateaubriand, was giving speeches and publishing notes calling for European intervention. The pressure was growing, but the great powers were still reluctant on entering the conflict. Let's get back to Greece. The year is 1826. Koudouriotis left the government, and a new provisional government was established under the leadership of the Peloponnesian landowner Andreas Thaimis. A new national assembly was being gathered. Was this like the third? Wait, hold on, no time for politics. There's a war going on. Look, the Ottomans just conquered almost the entirety of continental Greece. Don't worry, Karaiskakis, the new commander-in-chief for the Western Continental Greece campaign, got it covered. Athens was under siege though. Can we talk about politics now? Yes. Okay, where was I? Oh yes, the Third National Assembly. There were some discussions over where this National Assembly should assemble. And the government was almost in the brink of collapsing again over the issue. Look, it's Richard Church and Thomas Cochrane, two British officers that came to help the Greek cause. The former will lead the land forces, and the latter, the legendary veteran of the Napoleonic Wars, will lead the war at sea. However, they agreed only to work if the Greeks cooperated amongst themselves. And the Greeks agreed. Cochrane would later leave his post due to some disagreements. Church, on the other hand, fell in love with Greece and would remain there till the end of his long life. But this doesn't matter right now. What does matter is that the Greeks agreed to hold the Third National Assembly at Troezen in 1827, and with it came a new constitution, the so-called Troezen Constitution, the third in less than a decade. Well, under this new constitution, the role of governor of Greece, aka leader of the executive, was voted to Ioannis Kapodistrias. Yes, the same guy who said that he did not want to partake in any revolutionary cause. He changed his mind. However, he was living in semi-retirement in Geneva at the time. So they had to stick with Andreas Thaimis for a while. The Greeks asked for British mediation on an eventual peace treaty with the Ottomans. The Russians, feeling envious, decided that they too would partake on this eventual mediation. And soon France, as always desiring to be a decisive power in Europe, also decided to ask to take part on the mediation. So a partnership was signed between the three countries in 1827, called the Treaty of London. Their goal was to establish Greece as an autonomous but vassal state to the Sultan. So not really a proper independence, but it's a progress nonetheless, I guess. However, one question arose. What if the Ottomans didn't agree to a peace treaty? Well, to enforce an armistice so that negotiations could flow, the three powers sent their navies to Greece. The three powers had the brilliant idea of entering the Bay of Navarino with their fleet, where the majority of the Turkish and Egyptian fleet were anchored. The plan was just to intimidate the Sultan into accepting the negotiations of peace under the Treaty of London, not to destroy the Ottoman fleet. A brilliant plan indeed. So they entered the bay, then fight broke out by accident. What the hell, the Ottoman Egyptian fleet is destroyed, who would have guessed? So now the Europeans were officially inside the conflict, well, mainly Russia, since the Ottomans declared direct war against them, beginning the Russo-Turkish War. Actually, it was the 9th Russo-Turkish War. I think they should give other names to these. No? Okay, it's Kapodistrias' time. He finally reached Greece to get his appointment of governor established during the Troezen Constitution a year before. Remember? Well, Count Kapodistrias actually wasn't really fond of democracy. He preferred the rule of law under an educated elite. So he rejected the new constitution and demanded full powers for himself. The Greeks were okay with it, though. What is this sound? Oh, it's the Sultan. He's saying that he won't agree with any treaty imposed by the European powers, and that he still has the majority of Greece occupied by his dear allies, the Egyptians. It's 1828. The British had agreed to an evacuation plan with the Egyptians, and France sent an expeditionary force to the Peloponnese. By 1829, the Russians were already destroying the Ottomans during the war, and the Greeks were trying to take most land they could to bargain during an eventual peace treaty. The old proposal of an autonomous but vassal Greek state was thrown into the trash. Now the three powers were demanding full independence for the Hellenic nation. Meanwhile, Kapodistrias was busy creating a country out of the revolution, establishing schools, a printing press, an orphanage, a military academy, currency, and many more. However, always an autocrat, Capodistrias started persecuting political enemies. Petrobey, which was suffering from massive debts since his local rule over the Mani Peninsula, his main source of income, was being undermined by the new government, swiftly started an armed revolt against Capodistrias. Capodistrias imprisoned him. Petrobey's son and younger brother did not like this, and in 1831 they killed Capodistrias. Whatever said the three great powers, they always preferred a Greek monarchy anyways, and in 1832 they placed the Bavarian prince Otto from the neutral house of Wittelsbach as the king of Greece. The Sultan, after being beaten by the Russians in 1829 and without any options left, he agreed with recognizing the Kingdom of Greece. So, on the 11th of May 1832, finally, after 11 years of struggle, or you could probably say after 379 years of Ottoman rule, the Greeks officially reached nationhood. The Greek Revolution happened during a time when the sweeping political reforms and new concepts brought by the French Revolution and Napoleonic Wars suffered opposition from the new reactionary European order, established under the Congress of Vienna. It was a struggle brought by nationalism, and in many ways it was a preface to the nationalist revolutions of the 19th century, and one of the first signs of the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and with it, the birth of Balkan people on the internet. I would like to thank my Patreon supporters who made this video possible. A special thanks to StillyDan32 and a huge special thanks to Romulus Rancid. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for your support. And also, thank you for watching this video.